offense for everyone to initiate, have any sexual or indecent relations with anyone under the age of 18 years. So in a country where 33% of the girls below the age of 18 are forced into early marriage, and of boys below the age of 18 being abused, I have with me here Victor Chirimuta to help me unpack the reasons that led His Excellency to implement this intervention and say what it means for young people. In addition, we also have we're still expecting a junior parliamentarian in the studio to represent the youth voice in this conversation. But right now, it's a very good morning to you. Good morning to you, Victor.
Hey, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm lovely, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Right, so let's get straight into it. What were the motivations behind raising the age of consent from 16 to 18? Can you explain the reasoning and the objectives behind this decision?
All right, so the raising of the age of consent is grounded in the Zimbabwean constitution, which defines any person below the age of 18 as a child, and then secondly in the Legal Age of Majority Act, which stipulates 18 as the age of majority. So what then happened was, there was a court case that happened, I think, 2 years ago, in Diana Eunice Kangwenda versus Minister of Justice, and within this case, the argument was to say that it is discriminatory to say that the age of consent should be 16 because it leaves other children without the protection of the law. Hence, therefore, the court then moved to say, let's raise the age of consent from 16 to 18.
All right. So in February, we heard of Yokai Dandara, a 14-year-old girl who died in childbirth after being abused by a family member. Can you elaborate what family members are expected to do when children are abused? Because I think most people keep it hush-hush.
Yeah.
But what are they expected to do?
No, we've always maintained to say when violence happens, when abuse happens, the port of call should be the police. Go and report the case. It's not something that we can discuss at family level. To say kuti hapa nyakaitika ngatigare pasi semhuri tione kuti papinda mweya wakaita sei kana tione kuti togadzirisa nyaya iyi sei because at the end of the day someone's rights have been violated and that has to be reported and then the law has to take its course. So no matter whether it's a family member, whether it's an uncle, an auntie, or a family friend, all manner of violence should be reported.
All right. So what does the raising of age of consent mean for the young girls and boys below the age of 18 who need access to, reproductive health, given the statistics mentioned earlier, which is 33% of girls are forced into early marriages and 9% of the boys being abused?
So that's one of the biggest, I think, ongoing debates right now, to say we have the age of consent to sex at 18, but the reality is that adolescents and young people are already having sex below the age of 18 anyway. And because of that, they need access to these services. As the law stands right now, one needs parental or judicial consent for them to access some of these medical services. But then, given that disparity in the law, we are likely to have a lot of young people being left on the margins who can't access the services. Of course, it has detrimental effects on their own health. We know that the highest HIV transmission rate right now in Zimbabwe is between young people of ages 15 to 24, and it's among themselves. So with all these issues coming up, and maybe we might want to revisit the law around access to services, and then just allow to say maybe yes, age of consent to sex can be 18 for legal purposes, but the age of consent to access to services that does not necessarily need to be 18 as well to match the lived realities of adolescents.
Right, if you're just joining us, it is an information brought to you by Saywhat, where we're talking about age of consent. And with me in the studio, I've got Victor. And we're talking, age of consent. If you're following in January, the President, Dr. Mnangagwa, invoked his powers on the 13th, actually, under the Presidential Powers Act, making it a criminal offense for anyone to initiate or have any sexual or indecent relationships with anyone under the age of 18. So, right, what measures do you propose be taken by various stakeholders to ensure that parents, guardians, and the broader community contribute to the effective implementation of raised age of consent and overall well-being of children and adolescents?
The first thing that we need to do, Eve, is to normalize conversations around sex, and and this involves parents taking a leading role in educating their children around sex and consent.
All right.
Unfortunately, within our households, it's such a taboo topic.
It's taboo.
It's taboo. No one wants to talk to their parent about sex, but they expect you somehow to know how to do it. So now the challenge with it is, because we don't have such conversations, right? A lot of times when then there's violence or sexual violence in a way, children are not very free to go and speak to their parents in the first place to say, oh, well, maybe I was with my boyfriend and then with my girlfriend, then this happened, So after normalizing those conversations about sex at household level, within churches, at any place where young people gather, we should have these conversations. Even within the school, let's talk about consent and let's raise as much awareness as we can around the issues of consent. But then beyond that, we need to also lobby the government to implement its laws and policies around the violation of children's rights, especially around the issues of sexual consent, because the law already is there. You've read out the law that was at least given out beginning of this year by His Excellency. The law exists, but what's lacking is the implementation of the law. So we also need to then have that sort of like unified force, from the government, from duty bearers to implement the existing law. And then beyond that, we now need to look at the current law and say, are there any gaps within our legal framework, and what can we do to strengthen the protection of the rights of young people? So, for example, when it comes to the issue of the age of consent to access to services, we could really still do a lot of work around that to say, maybe let's lower the age of consent to access to services to allow as many young people as possible to access services as and when they require them. Because at the end of the day, teenage pregnancies are still happening. Teenage maternal mortality is still a reality. Teenage HIV transmission is still happening anyway. We have a lot of cases of STIs among adolescents. And we can't ignore that fact. It is
True.
a reality that's happening, and we need to strengthen the law around that to ensure that every young person has the highest attainable standard of health as guaranteed by the Zimbabwean Constitution.
Right. I like how you say this starts in the house, in as much as we don't talk about it, but it's conversations we need to have to avoid such. So, any parting shots? That was a long one.
You know what? I think I'll still come back to normalizing conversations about sex.
All right.
Talk about it. It is such a huge part of a person's life. From the moment a person enters adolescence at age maybe 13 up until they die, sex is just a continuous part of who we are, and we can't ignore it, But at the same time, some of these issues we can't then abrogate them or dump them on the state. It is also on us as parents, as guardians, as elder brothers, as cousins, to have these conversations and ensure that the young people are growing up in a protective environment. So we need to work together, I think, across the board: parents, guardians, civil society organizations, together with the government, with the health sector. We need to work together to ensure that the environment in which we're raising our young people guarantees the protection of their sexual rights.
Right. So remember, this program is brought to you by Saywhat with the support from the United Nations Populations Fund, Embassy of Sweden in Zimbabwe, and Stop TB Partnership. Saywhat encourages young people in the country to call 577 to report child abuse, or if you know someone who needs free counseling. And with me in the studio is Victor. And Victor, thank you so much for coming through.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Right, we at Star FM sounding good all the time. You take your time with me. It is 25 minutes before 10. Good morning.
The Morning Galaxy on Star FM.